Welcome to the second meeting of the City of Columbus Charter Review Commission, the April 25 meeting. All members are present, and we welcome any guests that we might have today. The agenda previously was sent out to all of us by staff. Are there any concerns or any recommendations for revisions to today's agenda? If not, we'll proceed with the agenda that we have, and I would ask if members have had an opportunity to review the minutes of our inaugural meeting, and if so, if I'll have a motion for approval.
I would just like to note that there was one correction, and the amended meeting minutes have been distributed, and Josh Cox's name has been substituted for City Attorney Pfeiffer's name as appropriate in the minutes.
Thank you.
I would move approval of the minutes of our previous meeting, which was what?
April 25, or I'm sorry, April 17th.
17th.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Our minutes are approved. We are now going to hear a presentation from Josh Cox, Chief Counsel to the Columbus City Attorney, on the traditional role for city charters in Ohio and here in Columbus, and essentially what materials are appropriate for charter review and which are not. With that, Josh, we welcome you to the Commission and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. And I want to start with just, I don't mean this down to anybody, but I think it helps to put it in context of the structure of governments that we might be more familiar with in terms of where the charter fits into that process. And on the federal level, you of course have the U.S. Constitution, which establishes the structure and the form of government that vests the legislative power in the Congress. Similarly, at the state level, you have the Ohio Constitution, which likewise establishes the structure of the government and vests the legislative power in the General Assembly. Similarly, the charter is the equivalent of those two documents for the city, and then it establishes the basic framework of city government and vests the legislative power in the city council. Now, granted, the U.S. and Ohio Constitutions are broader governing documents and contain a lot more subjects. However, and the charter is more limited, but the essential purpose is the same. The charter is to, as the city attorney mentioned last time, is to establish the framework of the city's governmental organization and control the exercise of the power of local self-government as authorized by the Ohio Constitution. So if we're looking at what is appropriate for a charter as opposed to an ordinance, you keep in mind that there's the general prohibition that neither an ordinance nor a charter provision can be in conflict with the Ohio or the U.S. Constitution. But other than that, there really is no bright line test as to what can or cannot be in the charter. And I'll use the state as an example. In the state, you have casinos, which are addressed in the Ohio Constitution. And in the Ohio Constitution, it covers everything from tax rates, locations, licensing fees, investment requirements, distribution of proceeds, very detailed coverage of those issues, all relating to that single subject. Contrast that with video lottery terminals at racetracks, racinos. That's one line in the Constitution generally authorizing lotteries, and the rest of those provisions are addressed in the revised code. And since it's in the revised code, it's subject to periodic changes and adjustments by the General Assembly as they deem appropriate. And contrast that with casinos, where we wanted to change a parcel number, we had to amend the Ohio Constitution, which is, Representative Curtin remembers, was a arduous process. And I think that just illustrates the example. There's nothing illegal about putting that level of detail in the Constitution, but it's really a question of what's appropriate for the governing document of the governmental entity. So our advice, the city attorney's advice, as to what's appropriate for the charter versus an ordinance is, particularly as to additions to the charter, if it's matter that can be legislated under the current charter, it should not be placed in the charter. And I'll illustrate that with a couple of examples. One, a provision that's already in the charter, and then another hypothetical addition. The city attorney mentioned last time the residency provision, which is in the charter. Because that's in the charter, the change in the state law as interpreted by the Supreme Court and upheld by the Supreme Court, or as passed by the General Assembly and as upheld by the Supreme Court, allows municipalities to make some provision for residency. But that's not something that the city can currently do because that provision's in the charter. Now, it doesn't mean that whether that's appropriate or whether that's something that the city wants to do or not do. The point is that currently, because it's in the charter, there's nothing we can do to address that issue in response to changes by the General Assembly absent amendment of the charter. So that's a provision that I would argue, as other cities have done, is if it's appropriate to be addressed, it's appropriate to be addressed by ordinance rather than placing something of that specificity in the charter. If you wanted to add something, say, to add a department or an office to the charter, that's something that currently the City Council has the authority to do under the existing provisions of the charter. We'll note that only 2 departments are mentioned in the charter, public service and public safety. All the other departments have been created by ordinance by council. So there's currently flexibility to do that. So there wouldn't be any reason to put additional departments into the charter. So just by way of illustration, those are a couple examples that I have. And hopefully that's helpful and as we move forward, be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have questions for Mr. Cox?
May I raise one? I want to test my memory to some extent here, but Mr. Cox, when our charter is silent in any areas where the charter is silent, but the area is spoken to by either the Ohio Constitution or the Ohio Revised Code, are we then subject to, and in effect must follow, the Ohio Revised Code in instances where we don't speak to an item ourselves in the charter?
Well, there are 2 parts to that, answer that question. First, we're always governed by provisions of the Ohio Constitution, the U.S. Constitution. You can't do anything in the charter or ordinances that conflict with that. So those provisions are always going to govern in any conflict situation. We have a provision in the charter, section 232, which deals with general laws being applicable to the city. And I'll just read that to save you digging it up. All general laws of the state applicable to municipal corporations now or hereafter enacted, and which are not in conflict with the provisions of this charter or with ordinances or resolutions hereafter enacted by City Council, shall be applicable to the city, provided, however, that nothing contained in this charter shall be construed as limiting the power of the City Council to enact any ordinance or resolution not in conflict with the Constitution of the state or with the express provisions of this charter. So that basically says general laws of the state, which are not in conflict with something that the city has already passed, are applicable to the city. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Cox? If not, Josh, thank you very much. Co-chair Moore and myself met the other day with Brian Clark, Senior Legislative Advisor to City Council, and we thought it would be advantageous for the commission to get his perspectives on previous charter review committees, at least those going back to 83, Brian, is that correct? 93, to help, give us some context for some of these issues that have been addressed in the recent past and whether they were acted upon or not. And with that, we'd ask Mr. Cox to illuminate us on some of our predecessor commissions.
Thank you, Co-Chair Curtin. All of the commission members have an additional handout in addition to my presentation that gives an overview of each of the specific recommendations or lack thereof that were provided by previous charter review commissions. It also gives information about where council took action and the outcome of that vote. So as part of staff's research in support of the Charter Review Commission, we've reviewed the Columbus Charter Review committees and commissions appointed in 91, 98, 99, and 2010. The following provides a cursory overview of those commissions, key themes from their history, and key findings based on related staff research. In June 1991, former Mayor Dana Reinhardt, former City Council President Cindy Lazarus, and former City Attorney Ron O'Brien convened a 5-member Charter Review Commission. After a 2-year comprehensive review of the city charter, the commission presented council and the mayor with a report of recommendations in March 1993. By that time, the city had elected a new mayor, Greg Lashutka. Council appointed a 3-member team headed by Matt Habash to review the report and make recommendations regarding what should be placed before voters. Council ultimately placed 3 issues before voters, one of which passed. In 1998, former Mayor Greg Lashutka and then City Council President Michael B. Coleman appointed an 8-member Charter Review Committee. After a comprehensive review of the city charter, the committee presented council and the mayor with a report of recommendations in July 1998. Of the 7 areas where the commission recommended changes, council concurred with the commission and placed each issue on the November ballot. All 7 were adopted by Columbus electors. The mayor and council president reappointed the same committee in February 1999, asking the committee to specifically give recommendations regarding selection and removal procedures for police and fire chiefs. After months of deliberation, the committee presented to the mayor and council several recommendations regarding the issues at question. Council placed 1 issue on the special election ballot. The issue was adopted. And in June 2010, council appointed a 5-member charter review committee to study compliance with charter provisions with Ohio law regarding open meetings and executive sessions. The committee reported back in July 2010. Council placed the committee recommended language on the November ballot, and the issue was adopted. Together, these commissions did the following. They weighed in on 36 specific issues regarding municipal governance. They recommended amendments for 25 issues and recommended either no change or further study for 11 additional issues. Council, in response, placed 12 issues on the ballot for voter approval as a result of these charter review commissions. We as staff would point to several key themes from these 4 previous charter review commissions. First, Columbus's charter review commissions have not been formed in consistent ways. Half of the charter review commissions have been episodic and issue-driven. The other half of the reviews have been episodic yet comprehensive. Charter review commissions have taken a median of 3 months to conclude their reviews. One outlier, the 1991 commission, took over 2 years to complete its recommendations, yet led to the fewest ballot issues after council received that report. Some issues have reemerged through previous charter reviews. For example, each review has focused a good deal of time and energy on civil service modernization, yet the issues have not been fully addressed at the ballot box. Other issues have been presented to each commission but have been well settled by previous reviews. The composition of charter review commissions has not been consistent, but for good reason. Specific areas of expertise were called for in making key amendment recommendations during some previous commissions, leading to an 8-member commission in 98 and 99, and a 5-member commission in 93 and 2010. In reviewing the records and reports of the 91, 98, 99, and 2010 Charter Review Commission, staff have noted key findings that may inform the work of this commission. As Auditor Dorian stated last week, while our charter deserves attention and likely needs some revision, it has generally served us well for nearly 100 years. This is self-evident in the thoughtful professional review and vetting of previous issues throughout the 4 previous commissions. With this in mind, what is, quote, the best way to craft charter reviews and amendments? Commission co-chairs have asked staff to review other city charters in preparation for this discussion. One item provided to members was the National Civic League's model charter. An outgrowth of the progressive movement of the early 1900s, this model charter reads like a pick-your-own-adventure story, and for good reason. No 2 cities are exactly alike. Their charters are products of the unique social, political, economic, and cultural contexts of the people drafting and adopting them. Ohio's city charters demonstrate these simple truths. Frequently, Ohio charters reflect the historic political crises and scandals faced by local governments. In Toledo, for example, the end of controversial Mayor Carty Finkbeiner's terms was marked by significant and unique charter amendments intended to limit the powers and authorities of the mayor's office. Cleveland, after being roiled with corruption and turmoil for decades, has followed Cuyahoga County's path in adopting mandatory periodic charter reviews, creating a systematic mechanism to address structural barriers to reform embedded in their city's charter. Lastly, Cincinnati enacted a far-reaching reform charter in direct response to the corruption of the Boss-Cox era, forming the state's longest-running local third party, the Charterites, in the process. No relation to the Chief Counsel. Just as importantly, charters outside Ohio are the result of unique state constitutional and general law provisions that make apples-to-apples comparisons very difficult. For example, cities in North Carolina have no home rule authority and as such no analog to our charters. In Texas, local government is a fragmented collection of home rule municipalities, councils of government, special districts, and public improvement districts. Depending on which city you're looking at, you'd have to look at all of these factors to determine who has what authority. Perhaps because of these unique local conditions, municipal charters have served as incubators for innovation throughout Ohio. We see this in the multiplicity of approaches to structuring local government and the varied public policy goals that citizens have placed in their governing documents. This allows us to learn from the innovations of others, considering and incorporating new ideas and novel solutions that best fit the needs for our cities. As a result of the previous points, there are many common practices, themes, and approaches that we as staff can identify in charters across Ohio and the country. However, there are no true best practices upon which to draw. Rather, there are common practices that in our city's context could be considered best for our long-term governance. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Do we have questions for Mr. Clark?
I have a question. If we get to this in a future meeting, just let me know, but what's the process between the charter commissions making recommendations and then those recommendations going to the ballot?
I'd be happy to answer part of that, but I'd rely on the chief counsel for some of the more technical legal items, if that's okay. The general process would be the council would receive it. There have been a variety of ways that council has considered these recommendations. For example, the 93 Charter Review Commission report was reported to a 3-member subcommittee of council. That committee was charged with reviewing these ideas, polling each of the council members for their support of the ideas, and then prioritizing based on support. Others, like the 2010, were a fairly quick process. Council knew that action needed to happen, so it was supported based upon the committee's recommendations. But generally speaking, council has to act by ordinance, 2/3 vote of council, to place any charter amendment on the ballot, and the charter can only be amended by a vote of the electors under our charter and the Ohio Constitution.
The only thing I'd add to that is there's no legal requirements as it relates to a charter review commission in terms of amendment. There is as it relates to adopting the charter, but not as to amendments. So this is essentially just a product of council appointing an ad hoc committee to make recommendations to it, but all the legal authority is with council to accept or reject any recommendations and proceed.
Any other questions for staff based on this presentation? If not, Brian, thank you for the thorough work as always. As I believe I mentioned in my introductory comments, Co-Chair Moore and I meet with administration and council staff within a few days following each of these meetings to basically debrief and to set a path for further research that's necessary to be done and to start laying out a context in order for the next meeting. In that vein, at our last meeting a few days ago, we thought we would request staff to talk about a process for how we could most efficiently use our time, how we could categorize topics in a manner that would be orderly and hopefully intuitive, not only to us, but to the residents and citizens of the city. And with that, we're to number 5 on our agenda today to begin talking about how we can most efficiently utilize our time and be coherent in terms of steps going forward. With that, Brian, you want to begin to lead us through that process?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for the opportunity to sort of think here internally. I've had an opportunity, Sherry and I, to have a lot of conversation about how we might go about approaching this, and I think that our recommendation to the commission would be to find a good balance between assuring that we've covered every provision of the charter, but have placed all of those provisions in sort of buckets or themes as we move forward. If you read our charter beginning to end, you actually have to skip back and forth between sections to sort of follow that thread of specific things. The clerk's duties is a perfect example of that. You would start in the second full section of the charter to find some of her duties, and they're sort of sprinkled throughout the rest of the charter. So with that, Sherry and I are recommending that we identify and bring back to you at the next meeting some buckets or themes under which we could place all of the charter provisions, and then present to you research at your request, and then recommendations that have come from us and from the administration and the various departments of the city regarding those items.
Are we soliciting input or suggestions or asking other entities what issues they have with the charter? And the reason I bring that up, what comes to mind is the Franklin County Board of Elections. A lot of the charter stuff deals with elections and ballot issues and who certifies petitions and things like that. And it seems like I've heard that there are sometimes conflicts between the Board of Elections' normal procedures and what the charter requires. And so I'm just wondering if we are reaching out to people like that and say, what things in our charter cause you heartburn? Do you have suggestions? That type of stuff.
I think that's a great recommendation, something we can look at. Internally, what we've done is we've obviously evaluated us, our elected officials, and also our department heads, because they deal with the charter most often. And I think what we, having had some of those issues in the past, we know a lot of the areas where we do conflict with the Board of Elections, but Brian and I can talk about making some contact with them and reaching out and see if they can have someone who can work with us on that. And as well, we do obviously, and I think we'll get to that later, Adam's going to give us a presentation about how anybody can give us suggestions, so we can work on that.
Great.
I would only ask one question, but it's actually to City Auditor Dorian. Since you sat on commissions in the past, can you speak to how those commissions took a comprehensive look at the charter?
Yeah, what Brian had indicated is true. Most of those committees, I guess this is, I know it's my third, maybe my fourth commission, but they usually were driven by rather specific issues. I would say there was a cursory review of the charter, but never focused on as many issues as we'll probably look at here. So as I said, the previous commissions usually addressed sections that were brought forth for some reason or by some person or department, And we focused on those sections. Okay.
Well, I just add the recommended approach is acceptable to me. Thank you.
Any other concerns or questions about process? When Marshall and I met with staff last week, one of the questions I raised was our charter doesn't have an automatic mechanism for the creation of these types of commission. Some state constitutions have that, requiring a periodic constitutional review. Some city charters have that across this land, an automatic mechanism for triggering the appointment of a panel similar to this that would take a look at charters. And one idea I raised is, what interval makes sense? And I just threw out an idea with no more than 10 nanoseconds of thought, quite frankly, behind it, about whether a decennial review tied to the census, in the year following the decennial census, perhaps. But that is only one idea, and with that, I would ask Brian to key off of that thought, give us staff input, recommendations, if you have any early thoughts about that, and solicit feedback from commission members about whether or not it makes sense to spend time looking at that type of provision in the charter that would give sort of an automatic trigger to this sort of process.
Thank you, Co-Chair Curtin. So Commission's co-chairs asked staff to analyze other Ohio municipal charters to identify common practices that might be considered for inclusion in the Columbus City Charter. According to the Ohio Municipal League, 265 Ohio municipalities have adopted a charter. That information has been provided, a full list of those, to the co-chairs. Staff limited the scope of research to cities with populations greater than 45,000 in the 2010 decennial census, as well as any charter municipality in Franklin County. This provided a total pool of 33 charter municipalities, 19 of which have a mayor-council form of government like the city of Columbus. This list allowed staff to focus on cities more likely to face challenges similar in type and scope to the city of Columbus. Of the 33 municipalities analyzed, 27 of the cities, approximately 82%, have charter provisions requiring the periodic appointment of a charter review commission. The vast majorities of these provisions were added to the charters beginning in the 1980s. Charters adopted in or after the 1970s tend to have the provision as part of the charter as originally adopted. While there's variability in the provisions, one sort of stuck out as representing a typical charter review commission requirement. So this is from Elyria, Ohio, section 2107 of their city charter. In January 1970 and in January of each 10th year thereafter, the council shall appoint 5 qualified electors of the city, holding no other office, appointment, or employment in the government of the city, as members of a charter review commission. Such commission shall review the charter of the city, and within 1 year after such appointment, recommend to council such alterations, revisions, and amendments, if any, to this charter as in its judgment are desirable. After consideration of the recommendations of the Charter Review Commission, the council may submit all or any of such proposed alterations, revisions, or amendments to this charter in the manner provided for in Article 18, Section 9 of the Constitution of Ohio. The members appointed to the Charter Review Commission shall serve without compensation. Meetings of the Charter Review Commission shall be open to the public. Staff have identified 3 key themes across these Charter Review Commission provisions. First, the charters clearly state the goals of the Charter Review Commission, yet afford broad latitude to the Commission within those goals. The most common goal is a comprehensive review of the charter, focusing on areas where the Commission feels amendments or deletions may be warranted. Second, the charters require the Commission to submit a final report of recommendations to the Council and less frequently to the Mayor. Given Council's constitutional responsibility and authority to place proposed charter amendments before the electors of the municipality, this provision is to be expected. Third, the charter set an expectation that the commission will be made up of citizens who are deeply engaged in and committed to their community. The very act of including a citizen-run periodic charter review speaks to the importance of community dialogue and debate about the cornerstone document for local self-governance. In addition to these common themes, several provisions appear frequently in these charters. A majority of the cities, approximately 63%, conduct reviews on a decennial, i.e. every 10-year basis. This does not preclude more frequent commissions, but sets a minimum standard for review of the city charter. A sizable majority of cities, 81%, limit commission membership to qualified electors of the municipality. The charter serves as the city's constitution and may only be framed and amended by a vote of the municipal electors. Thus, the decision to limit commission membership to the city's electors merits strong consideration. An equally sizable majority, 81%, place in the charter a deadline for appointing the commission. This provides for the uniform operation of the charter requirements. A smaller percentage of charters, approximately 33%, expressly excludes city officials, appointees, and employees from serving on the commission. A majority of cities, 67%, require submission of recommendations by a date certain. The median time frame for submitting committee reports is 8 months from appointment. This assures the efficient operation of the commission with the flexibility of reappointing the commission if the city deems fit. And a supermajority of cities, 81%, give council full discretion in acting on commission recommendations. It should be noted that of the remaining cities, 2 simply require that council must act to approve or decline each recommendation, while a third requires only that council submit recommendations as written if it chooses in its discretion to place them before the voters. In each instance, council has discretion in placing any issue before voters, which is in keeping with the 2 methods of charter amendment placed in the Ohio Constitution. Lastly, the charter provisions range from a single sentence to multiple sections of prescriptive requirements. The most common provisions, however, are prescriptive as to the commission's makeup, appointment, and deadlines, as well as council's action on recommendations. Based on staff research, we recommend that the commission consider recommending the adoption of an automatic periodic charter review commission provision in the city charter. Several common practices listed above could well serve the city if such a recommendation were made. And for your reading pleasure, after the report, there's a summary of the research that we provided, as well as some additional information about the cities and their charters. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions for Mr. Clark? Discussion among members about the merits or demerits of an automatic provision in the charter. It seems though the staff is leaning toward recommending such. Mr. Dorian?
First of all, I certainly agree that's a good idea, decennial every 10 years approximately, as long as we don't limit the city to more frequent reviews, if necessary. God forbid you have a situation like Cleveland or Toledo or something like that that would call for a quicker response. I also was listening closely there, and you probably need some definition as to who selects the members. There was a broad categorization, but is it the mayor, is it council, is it city attorney, or a combination thereof? So I think we'd have to identify who the, I'm going to use the term appointing authority would be. And I would feel very strongly that the members of such a commission should be City of Columbus electors.
I think that's well taken. Many cities do not have independently elected auditors and attorneys. Columbus does, always has since we've had the city charter. At first blush, I like the idea of having these independently elected office holders have a role in appointing members to a charter review commission. The city attorney's office obviously has the legal expertise and is the custodian of the legal history of the city. The city auditor has the financial expertise and is the custodian of the financial history of the city. Obviously, though, the mayor is the chief executive. The council is the most representative body with 7 members. So are there thoughts, pro or con, about how narrow or how wide the appointing authority should be vested? If we were to go down this route?
I think I agree that it's a good idea to have a charter provision that triggers a charter review. But I think it should be pretty open-ended, and again, the one that you described said only electors of the city, no city employees could be in it. We would only have 3 qualified members of this commission under those criteria, and I think we're pretty good. So I think it's a good idea to have a trigger, a reminder, if you will, a save the date in the charter that says, hey, it's time to do this again. But I would think it'd be good to be pretty open-ended about who could serve on it, and I'm not sure whether the city attorney and the city auditor ought to be part of the appointing authority. They should certainly be part of the process and need to be at the table as they are here. So I'm kind of open on that.
Are there any commission members who don't like the idea of an automatic, say, every 10-year trigger? Or do we have unanimity of opinion that that would be a good thing?
I would so move if you were to entertain a motion on such.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. So obviously, we're not going to adopt a specific recommendation today, but we've planted the seed for further discussion at our next and subsequent meetings. I'm open-minded on the appointing authority. My thought would be if there's not specific appointing authority given to the city attorney and the city auditor, perhaps one way to accommodate their input and expertise at the table would be to make them ex officio members of future commissions. I guess it would be appropriate to ask staff to further refine the thoughts of the administration and council and the city attorney's office and the city auditor's office about their thoughts about what would constitute a best practice for what we should consider perhaps at our next and subsequent meetings of this panel for refining what's going to be, looks like a recommendation for having an automatic trigger mechanism in the charter to recommend to City Council.
Thank you. We'll be sure to have some specific recommendations about what might be in that in time for the next commission meeting.
And full disclosure here, I am not currently a elector of the City of Columbus. I made that known to the appointing authorities before they stuck me on this panel.
But a product of growing up in this city, right?
Most of my life.
And you represent many members of this city in other elected capacities.
I do indeed, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't hiding that untimely fact. Brian, did I skip over any provision on the agenda? Are we in the right place at the right time here?
Let's take a look here. I believe we're at the right place, issue 2, section C, under the 5th point.
Okay, the reason I asked that question is I was wondering whether we had adequately charged staff with making a recommendation as what that first bucket or first category of issues should be that this panel is going to address.
Sorry for that loud noise.
Technical time.
We'll take that as a yes.
I feel like we're comfortable, we know which direction we're going next. The question would be, is the commission comfortable with that charge? You guys are
I guess I
comfortable?
understood that you were going to bring back the ideas of buckets for the next meeting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and our goal would be to have a recommendation to the co-chairs and to the commission members prior to that meeting about the first theme to be fully vetted here before you, so that we're able to adequately present items to discuss at that next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman? Since I think I'm the only one here wearing two hats, you might say, a member of this commission and at the same time an elected office holder of the city. Is there anything inappropriate, or does anyone object if in my role as city auditor and as we discuss the framework of the city, as you mentioned, different elected people, any inappropriateness to me, for me to sit with Brian and Sherry and give my thoughts as to the structure of the city? I'll be glad to do it in open session all the time, but it may take some time. So I just want to, I'd like to be able to have those.
Actually, the more input we get from you, Mr. Doran, the better off this work product will be. So we would ask you to impose your will as formally or informally as you see fit throughout the entire process. There are no secrets in the world, and we will feel the force when you weigh in.
We'll do a much better job.
And just full disclosure in that vein, Mr. Doran, at our last debrief, co-chair Moore and I asked staff to solicit your thoughts on a couple of items. One being whether we should be looking at sort of modern day requirements for what type of financial documents, what type of financial transparency your successor should be obligated to provide. The auditor's office does a masterful job now making CAFRs, making audits, making the nuts and bolts of city finances available to the public, but you're not required to do a lot of what you do. And so, to Josh's earlier point, some of that may not be appropriate for the charter. Some of it may be more appropriate or entirely appropriate for the city code. But it's one of the areas that we asked the staff to solicit your thoughts on.
You mentioned, referred to my successor. I'm not planning on going.
Fair thought.
You probably have petitions ready.
Are we to C?
Yes, sir.
With that, we are to delve into technical corrections to the charter. Brian?
So I will begin this by saying that there are definitely legal implications for this particular issue. It's not one that is prevalent enough in Ohio city charters to have a good handle on how courts might view this type of proposal. So I put that out there and would certainly defer to the chief counsel and any legal questions regarding this subject. So in researching past charter review commissions and other Ohio municipal charters, the simple question has arisen: is there a mechanism to make non-substantive technical corrections to a charter without a charter amendment? To answer this question, staff conducted an online search of Ohio charters and analyzed a broad sample of such mechanisms. This issue has actually been dealt with previously by the city of Columbus. Like many cities, our original charter used masculine pronouns throughout. City leaders soon viewed this once common practice as archaic and discriminatory. So in the 1998 Charter Review Commission, there was a proposal to grant to the city clerk the authority to address this issue. In response, council passed Ordinance 1825-98, which placed before Columbus electors the following provision: the city clerk shall be authorized and directed in the printing of the charter to cause all references of whatever nature to individuals to be gender neutral without the use of pronouns he, his, him, she, hers, or her. Voters approved this amendment. Unlike other charter amendments, this ballot issue did not attempt to list all affected sections or instances of gender-specific pronouns. Instead, it provided ongoing authority to the city clerk to make very specific technical corrections. Further, the amendment did not actually add language to the charter itself. Rather, it conferred authority onto the city clerk. At the same time, and at the same election, in response to another recommendation, Council passed Ordinance 1829-98, which placed before Columbus electors numerous renumbering, resequencing, and reordering provisions. The amendment made no substantive changes to the charter. This had the one-time effect, according to both the Commission and Council, of making the charter easier to read. The voters adopted this amendment. In both instances, a vote of Columbus electors was required to make technical, non-substantive changes to the charter. And absent changes to gender-specific pronouns, no city official has the authority to make such corrections again in the future based on our research so far. Other Ohio cities have provided a much more expansive and permanent version of the gender-neutral printing provision by adopting an omnibus correction amendment to their charters. These provisions provide a way to make administrative changes to the charter without resorting to the ballot box to correct a misspelled word or renumber a few sections. The following are two examples of such provisions. First is from Kent, Ohio. States that following any election at which any amendment to this charter is adopted, the clerk of council, with the approval of council and the director of law, may, prior to any reprinting of this charter, make such changes therein, including the numbers, titles, and arrangement of articles, sections hereof, and typographical corrections as may be necessary or desirable to maintain or assure the logical and consistent ordering thereof, but no such change shall in any way affect the substance or meaning of this charter or any part thereof or amendment thereto. And then from Beaver Creek, Ohio, this charter may be amended as provided in Article 18, Section 9 of the Constitution of the State of Ohio. The council is granted the authority by affirmative vote of 5 members to, by ordinance, incorporate administrative changes to this charter, provided no substantive changes to the charter are caused. Such administrative changes shall be limited to errors of grammar, sentence construction, standardization of similar terms, and paragraph renumbering as necessary. Such administrative changes shall be made at the next reprinting of the charter. So the authority to correct the charter is rarely vested in a single governmental entity in a city. In Kent, the city clerk may make corrections only with the consent of council and the law director. In Beaver Creek, council may make corrections, but as with any other ordinance, must have the city attorney sign off on that ordinance. The authority to correct the charter is strictly limited to items of an administrative, non-substantive nature. The charters make clear that corrections may not affect the legal intent or purpose of any charter provision. And then lastly, the authority to correct the charter is often triggered by an event, the reprinting of the charter or the passage of a charter amendment. This provides clarity for the entity given the authority and provides assurance to voters that the authority will be exercised in a limited fashion. In addition to the foregoing, at least one Ohio city has recently adopted a more far-reaching charter correction provision. The city of Marysville in 2013 adopted an amendment that states, any section of this charter may be amended as provided for in Article 18, Section 9 of the Ohio Constitution by submission of proposed amendments to the electors of the municipality. Such amendments may be initiated either by vote of 5 members of council or by petition to council of a number of electors equal to 10% of the total electors voting at the last municipal election. However, city council may by ordinance amend the charter so that it conforms with changes to state and federal law. As City Attorney Pfeiffer noted in his presentation last week, home rule authority is whatever 4 Ohio Supreme Court justices says it is. In light of the shifting court rulings on home rule authority, the voters of Marysville chose an innovative method to respond to court decisions that may fall on the side of state law versus home rule authority, rendering moot various provisions of their city charter. In contrast, Columbus, like virtually all Ohio cities, only allows mooted sections to be amended or repealed by a vote of the electors. While we are not recommending this approach in Columbus, it does illustrate one innovative solution to a long-standing challenge faced by city charters. So based on staff research, we recommend that the Commission consider a recommendation of a charter amendment that allows technical, non-substantive corrections to the charter. If the Commission chooses to recommend such a change, it would be very useful to carefully consider the 4 following questions. What checks and balances are necessary to guard against overreach in the exercise of this authority? Should the amendment strictly limit those items that may be corrected, and if so, how? Should action by the council be by council ordinance so that any change would be subject to the referendum? And then lastly, should corrections be tied to a specific event or timeline, or should they be on an as-needed basis? Following the presentation, there are representative samples of charter provisions that speak to this particular issue. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'll ask the first one, then I would ask my fellow commissioners to follow up, because this is an area we should have lots of questions about. And that is, your earlier presentation, Brian, was on the work of previous charter review commissions and committees going back to '93. Was this subject entertained by any of our predecessor commissions or committees?
So the subject came up as part of the '98 commission, of which the auditor was a part, and it was really focused on inconsistencies in numbering, sequencing, typographical errors, things of that nature. If you read through our charter today, you will find numerous errors of grammar, errors of spelling, punctuation, capitalization, archaic references to positions that no longer exist here at the City of Columbus. That commission made the determination that they would go to the voters of the City of Columbus and seek their authority to make those changes. But I will say that this type of provision is not so widespread and is relatively new versus the previous commission. So really, this would be the first commission doing a comprehensive review of the charter that can consider a provision like this.
Questions and reaction?
Just a comment, if we do move in this direction, I would recommend that we include another consideration that would be around how we inform voters if such corrections are made, even if they're minor in nature.
And Commissioner, that's well taken, and that's one of the reasons that we asked the question, should this be by ordinance of council, so that it would be fully vetted in a public forum, and should voters feel that we've overreached, they have the ultimate authority of filing for a referendum on that particular change.
I would concur that I think it's appropriate to have such authority within the charter, but maybe the word insist is too strong, but I would insist that it be done in the light of day, meaning by ordinance and subject to referendum. But we know from experience that there are errors from time to time in the production of a charter, and but whatever's done must be done in the light of day.
Commissioners Moore, Cabot?
I think it'd be nice to have a relatively simple way to clean up simple mistakes in the charter, so I support the concept, and we'd have to figure out the devil in the details.
Commissioner Moore?
I agree. As someone who does governance review for the organization I work for, every time you read it, you'll find something. And I do it annually. So I think it is a great suggestion, but I would second City Auditor's Dorian's suggestion. It needs to be done in the light of day.
Well, that makes it 5 for 5. I concur. I believe there should be a mechanism. I agree with Commissioner Dorian. There needs to be accountability. Therefore, I would agree it should be done by ordinance. Is there anyone on the panel who believes it should not be by ordinance?
I agree.
With that, if staff would draft some recommended language for us to look at our next or subsequent meetings, I think we have a second area of agreement today. We're slowly but surely making some progress.
Thank you.
Are there any other issues under C or D, Brian, that we need to review today?
Co-Chair Curtin, I believe that under D, we have several issues that staff would like to present on.
Okay. And is that going to be Angie?
It'll be Sherry Kish.
Sure. Okay.
So you'll see I passed out a document labeled budget copies, so we'll be reading from that today. So the City of Columbus strives to be the greenest city in America. The city has made huge advances in reducing our carbon footprint and reducing greenhouse gas emissions through implementing a citywide recycling program, engaging citizens in Green Spot, converting vehicles to cleaner, burning compressed natural gas, and retrofitting our buildings to be more energy efficient. Through the Mayor's Executive Order 2007-02, we have led by example and mandated efforts to reduce paper usage and increase the use of recycled products. In this vein, as we were reviewing the charter to prepare for this process, one section stood out. Currently, Section 26 of the charter requires 200 copies of each of the mayor's estimates, which is really our annual budget, that 200 be printed by council and that copies be sent to the newspapers and to the public library and its branches. In practice, the mayor's office through the Department of Finance and Management prints those copies, and currently the city does not furnish copies specifically to the public libraries or the newspapers. In recent years, the Department of Finance and Management started making a push to offer the budget in an electronic format and limit the number of paper copies, as they have experienced having boxes of leftover copies at the end of the year. The administration does have approximately 30 copies available to the public the day of the budget announcement in November, and anyone is welcome to take them. So what you'll see next is that I compared this to a few other cities just to give you an idea of what others do, but I will note that a majority of these have not been updated in at least the past 10 years, one dated back to 1967. So Cleveland's charter states that at least 1,000 copies thereof shall be printed for distributions to citizens who may call for them. Akron's charter is not specific to any specific copies being printed, but does say that it shall be printed and available for distribution not later than 2 weeks after its submission to the council. Toledo's charter states that at least 500 copies thereof shall be printed for distribution to citizens who may call for them, and the substance thereof shall be printed in the city journal. The mayor shall also publish the estimates in an electronic version for widespread distribution utilizing the World Wide Web or a similarly publicly accessible electronic manner. So based on the goal to be the greenest city in America and in light of the current practices, we recommend that the commission consider placing before the voters an amendment that allows the city to update this section to reflect current needs, technology, and practices. And so obviously some of the questions, we'd like to go ahead and answer for you. Trying to find my other little sheet. Obviously, who gets a lot of those copies now that we do generally print in general, over 100 copies. Those currently go to city council, city attorney, city auditor, city staff, right now the department heads and all of our budget management team. But again, the finance and management department do say that most people that call and request the budget want to know where to locate it on our website. Our website currently has our budget listed back to 2005, so you can go in each year and see it in color and see everything that you would get in the current format. This binder right here is pretty representative of the size of our budget each year of what people get when they do come that morning. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I actually would like to say I appreciate your comments, and it's important and part of good governance to align our charter with what the current practices are and allow for the advancements in technology. So your comments and the city attorney's comments last week regarding the mootness of our residency requirement are of particular interest to me. So I would ask for staff to identify other provisions of the charter that need to be updated and or other areas of the charter that are now rendered moot or duplicative, and present something to us at a future meeting so that we could get those things addressed fairly quickly in short order.
We can definitely do that.
Thank you.
Following up Co-Chair Moore's request, is it possible at this early stage to give the commission an example or two of the types of thing we'll be looking at that are obsolete, moot, so forth?
I can give you one, other than the residency issue. It's section 228, which deals with continuance of contracts. It talks about all contracts entered into by the city for its benefit prior to taking effect of this charter shall continue in full force and effect, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if we still have a contract with the Buggy Works from 1914 or not, but if we still have a contract that was in effect at the time of the enactment of the charter, I'd be shocked. So, I mean, I think that's an example of something that was put in, obviously, when the charter was enacted to ensure the continuation of legality of contracts, but is certainly obsolete today.
Can you repeat the section that you referenced?
That was 228.
Thank you.
That's helpful. At least four of us haven't memorized the city charter, as I'm sure Commissioner Dorian has. And as much as we're endeavoring to get through it before we fall asleep in the evening, it'd be helpful to get some direction about sections that we should probably be focusing more of our attention on. So I've just circled 228, and as you develop thoughts for where recommendations might be coming to us, if you could kind of give us a heads up, hey folks, start taking a look at 202 or 217 or whatever.
So, Curtin, excuse me for interrupting, would you like to see those, as the co-chair Moore suggested, in a list, or would you like, as we bring them up, that we make you aware of those? Just to make sure that we're preparing it the way that you would like to see it.
The latter, whatever's easiest and most intuitive for the staff. It helps us as we prepare for these meetings, I think, do some pre-readings. We're all endeavoring to do as much pre-reading as we can. Because of your thoroughness, there's a lot of reading to do, and I'm just trying to get as targeted as we could get. So any heads up on some of these sections before we actually entertain your presentations, I think would be helpful.
If I could point out one additional area, as Commissioner Cabot mentioned, the form of ballots is an area where state law, as we understand it, would control and is very prescriptive, and ultimately the ballots are prescribed by the Ohio Secretary of State. As much as we might like to, we have no control over Secretary Husted. So,
Mr. Chairman, that's one of the reasons I ask. I'll continue to meet with Brian and Sherry, but just to give an example, as I go through these, I make notes as to what I think is archaic, in particular as it impacts the financial side of the city, you might say. But as an example today, and you might make a note, we'll discuss this, but sections 121 and 123 are no longer necessary, and I don't want to limit my commentary to those, but and I could offer all kind of testimony as to what my reasoning is, but if you'd like to make a note of that.
Thank you.
Those are two that I will be suggesting.
Well, this is clearly a good example of what the charter intended to do a good thing, and everybody needs to know what the budget is, and so we're going to print 200 copies. But there are, with today's public record laws, of course, anybody who wants a copy of the budget can come and get it, and get it in whatever format that they need to have it in. So I'm sure there are plenty of other places in the charter like this that cause us to cut down too many trees, and so we need to update, and as best we can, we need to update in a way that is not just updating to today's technology, but updating to what tomorrow's technology might be. So the underlying concept of anybody who wants a copy of the budget should be able to get it is a better way of saying you have to print 200 copies and distribute them to libraries and newspapers, it seems to me.
I could give you an example, if I might. There's nothing in the charter that indicates how frequently or in what quantity we have to provide annual reports, but the document that I gave each of you today is an example. We used to produce that in probably 600 printed copies, and we mail it to the world. The city of Columbus, by the way, was one of the very first cities in the nation to have what we call a CAFR, a Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, on a website. Today, it's all on a website, that little disc that I gave each of you. We also distribute that to anyone on request, but we still print, instead of 600, maybe we print 100 of those booklets, and the vast majority of them are used in-house. Very rarely do we get a request for a printed document anymore. But it's available, as I said, to the world, and a lot less paper today than 10 years ago. So.
Any other comments or follow-up on that topic? I do think, segueing off of Commissioner Dorian's comments at our inaugural meeting, that there was a lot of wisdom among the framers of our 1914 document, and clearly, to Jeff's point, the requirement that 200 copies made available was the sunshine directive of the day, that this is the people's business that should be made available. And so the question I would ask staff and city attorney's office is, going forward, how do we frame the maximum sunlight directive that we can, either in the charter or in city code or both, one reflective of the other? You know, what is the 21st century equivalent of that 1914 directive, which was important enough to be in the charter then? So by my lights, some modern day version of that is important enough to be in the charter today. But obviously you don't want to be overly prescriptive in the charter. So any sort of language you could come back to us with that shows our intent to truly make sure that going forward we're honoring the spirit of those framers of 1914, that all of this as a people's business would be well received.
We can absolutely do that.
Co-Chair Moore, any follow-up on item D? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Have we exhausted item D, Brian?
I believe we have 2 items that the city clerk would like to present to the commission.
Okay.
I'm sure to follow along with what we have been discussing. Another section that we will be proposing, I believe, that you will see from us will be section 145, Bureau of Information and Publicity. And actually, the provisions in section 145 are the current responsibilities of the city clerk. There is and has not been a Bureau of Information and Publicity in my experience here. So it talks about this bureau that will distribute annual reports and produce the city bulletin, which are core functions of the city clerk. So much of that section is still accurate and happening, just not by bureau. So we will have you look at that, I'm sure. Also, section 11 is called Clerk and Employees. And unlike most sections of the city charter, this particular section deals with a variety of subjects, all within the same section. I'll just read it for you really quickly. The council shall appoint a clerk who shall be known as the city clerk, and such other officers and employees of council as may be necessary. The clerk shall keep records of such council, perform such other duties as may be required by this charter or by the council. Such clerk shall serve during the pleasure of the council. Council shall exercise no power of appointment except as herein expressly provided. So, as I was saying, unlike some of the other sections of the charter, this deals with not only the clerk, but it also deals with other employees of the council. It deals with council's ability to appoint or not appoint, except as provided. So we may suggest that you will look at separating these sections out as opposed to having everything taken care of. The section 13 that deals with the city treasurer, for example, is basically 2 sentences, and it calls for council appointing a city treasurer. It simply indicates that the treasurer would hold and administer the office during its pleasure and perform such duties and exercise powers as prescribed in the charter. So something maybe along those lines, more of a single purpose for that section. And then last, I was going to point out section 231, annual reports. As Mr. Dorian referred to, our annual reports and how we do that today. We do still compile the annual reports. We group them together. We publish them electronically. It refers to in section 231 that we publish it in book form as the annual report of the city. So we would not want that to be misleading. It is a book, but it is published electronically. Council back in 2001 made some changes to the city code to add definitions for printing and publishing. And I think that's right along the lines of what the commission is suggesting, that as we would go forward, there would be a different term or a different way that we look at how we print or publish these documents that we continue to do. We just do them in a different way. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the city clerk? Thank you, Angie. And the mayor's budget and the mayor's estimate, do we pass that or?
Yes, we'll go ahead and get you some language to consider for that.
Okay.
It's a 200 copy issue.
Okay, are we on to item number 6? Adam Luddy, preview of the Charter Review Commission website.
Yes, thank you, Co-Chair. Good afternoon to the commission. Before we turn our attention to the screen and take a look at the website, just would like to point out that the website, the web page rather, is a work in progress. So any suggestions that you have today, please do make them. And that also goes for the members of the public who are viewing this meeting. Are more than welcome to submit their comments and suggestions, and we'll show them how here in a couple of minutes. So if we would turn our attention to the screen, I'm going to pull up the home page of the Charter Review Commission. And I would say, too, to the commission that if you do have questions as we go through this, please feel free to stop me and jump right in. It might be helpful to look at that, to ask questions while we're looking at the individual pages you're interested in. So this is the landing page for the Charter Review Commission. The web address for the commission is columbus.gov/charter-review-commission. Now, if you're on the city's website, you can also go to City Council's page, and you'll see, as I'm indicating with my mouse on the left-hand side, a tab for the Charter Review Commission. And you'll note below that a list of sub-tabs with the various different pages that people can go to get information about the work of the commission. So these sub-tabs correspond with this list that you see on the Charter Review Commission's landing page. Preceding that is a brief paragraph of introduction about the founding of the commission. And beneath that, we'll just go through one by one and take a look at some of the information that's contained here. Most, if not all of this, will of course be growing over the coming weeks and months as the commission moves forward in its work. I'd like to call your attention to one thing that we won't look at right this second, that we're going to save until a little bit later. But I'd like you to note, if you would, the location on this landing page of 2 items. One is this large envelope, very difficult to miss. And above that, we read Contact the Charter Review Commission. And below that, we've got this red italics type, Sign up for Charter Review Commission emails. I'd ask that you note the location of those 2 items, particularly as we go on and look at some of the other pages. So let's begin with Commission members and mission, and learn more about the Charter Review Commission's members and its goals. I'm going to open these up in new tabs. And one of the first things I think you'll notice is, again, we've got in the very same place below the city seal, this large envelope and this red italics type. You're going to see this on every page that we visit because we wanted to make sure that those 2 items, which are of the utmost importance, are on every single page so that it's always easy for somebody to either submit their feedback or sign up for news releases and such about the work of the commission. So here we have just some text about the founding of the commission. And we also have, for instance, your bylaws in here as an element of this about the commission page. Because this is not a very prominent place for the bylaws, you'll see that elsewhere in a couple of minutes. Here we have a listing of the commission members and your job titles. And below that, we have the staff contacts. We have the mayors and council's liaisons to the commission, in this case, Mr. Clark. And if I were to click on Brian or Sherry or Clerk Levins's link right here, a new email would open up in my Microsoft Outlook or my email program, and I could just email them directly from this page. And of course, I could also give them a phone call right here. We've got the contact information there for everyone. As we scroll down past that, we get a little more background and history of the charter, a lot of what we've been discussing through the course of these first 2 meetings. Questions on the About the Commission page before we move on to our next page? Okay. So let's go back to the landing page, the home page, if you will. And below this commission members and mission, we see a link for calendar. And this also notes, again, that all meetings of the Charter Review Commission are open to the public. Now, when you're on the calendar page, there are two views that you can look at. One is a simple list of all upcoming meetings and events, and here we see the meeting that we're in right now. So we can see that, and as we add more meeting dates and other content, this list will fill out. We can also go to calendar view, and this is going to be helpful. The listing view is only going to show events that either are happening or are going to happen in the future. This calendar view will show us past meetings of the commission. So if I hover over April 17th, I see that a meeting was held at 2 p.m. in this very room, and I get a little bit of detail about the meeting. So this is an easy way for people to stay on top of when the commission will be meeting and what will be discussed, etc. Questions on the calendar page before we move on? Okay. Let's go then to the meeting materials page, and we see here view commission agendas, meeting minutes, and supporting documents. So there's going to be a lot of good content on here for residents who are interested in the work of the commission. You'll see that we've got this broken out by the date of the meeting. We could also just as easily break this out by the type of content. For instance, we could have a list of agendas or a list of minutes. So you'll see that basically everything that you've got and you're looking at, we have online. You'll note under April 17th, we did put up a draft version of the minutes, but we can update with approved minutes, etc. as we go forward. So if someone were to click on any one of these, they should see basically a PDF, and they can go through it. They can download it, save it very easily, print it directly from here. So we'll continue to update this page. It will grow longer as we go forward. And this will be a sort of clearinghouse for all of the information that we present at the meeting. Any question on the meeting materials page or suggestions before we move on? Okay. Here we can watch meeting videos. So past, absolutely. So past meetings of the Charter Review Commission will be on this page. And what we're going to find is, we see in this case our city attorney in the midst of his presentation. So you see April 17th meeting, and if we were to click on this, I'm going to mute it, but if we click on it, we can watch it right here on the page, so we're not taken to a separate landing page. We can watch it right here, and when we've had our fill of it, we can go back to the home page. Any questions about the videos? But this will also become a list. If it gets a bit unwieldy with just the size as you see in the videos, we may collapse some of them into hyperlinks that people can then view on another page.
Are the meetings aired live or are they recorded and shown later?
The meetings are recorded and shown later. Were there any questions on the meeting videos page? Any other questions? Let's go to the Commission News page. And what we have here is both news releases that have gone out about the Commission's work. Those have been archived here. We've also collected some of the clips that have accrued over since April 2nd, since the announcement of the meeting. So you'll see here we've got a Columbus Dispatch article, an editorial. This top one, I will add an attribution, is from This Week Community News, a recent article that they've done. And as news releases continue to go out to the public about the work of the Commission, those will be updated here chronologically as you see. And these are just simple hyperlinks to another page. Not to a PDF, but just to another page. And here they are. So you see there, This Week Community News article. Any questions about the Commission News page before we move on? Then let's go to, you see here the final item on this list is public comment. Now, what this does is on our home page, on our main page for the Charter Review Commission, there's two places that you can click that are going to take you to the same place. One is if you are down here in the public comment, you can open that up. We'll open that up in a new tab. Or if you're up here, and if you're on any page of the Commission, remember we saw this envelope, if you just click on the envelope, and let's look and see, here's what we see when we clicked on the text, and here's what we see when we clicked on the envelope. So let's take a look at what's on here. One thing that we're not able to support through this submission form is attachments. So we have a note here, as you see in bold, that if anyone would like to send documents for the Commission's consideration, that they please email them to the Charter Commission email address, which is charter@columbus.gov.
comments that are submitted through the submission form will also go to that email address, but unfortunately, we can't upload documents through this. However, if anyone does have attachments, they're more than welcome to send an email to that address directly. So let's very quickly just fill this out, because I'd like for you to see the page that you'll be taken to, that residents will be taken to after they have submitted a comment. Okay. So we have filled it out. We just scroll down to submit form, click on it, and you see that we have confirmation that the message has been delivered. And also, in order to navigate the site more easily, you can just click right here on this link, and that will return to the commission's main page. Okay. So again, that happens whether we click the envelope or whether we are down here at the bottom of the list. We can just go straight there. Any questions about that function before we move on to signing up for the emails? Yes, Coach?
Adam, when comments are sent in and aggregated, are they on the site for all to see?
No, and I don't know that that function would be supported. If it's something we can certainly check with our Department of Technology on, but I'm not aware of that function being available.
Another question, who receives the comments and how will we see them?
The first part I can answer, and the second part I think I would defer to the liaisons, but several staff will have access to the comments so that it's not just one person who is able to gain them. And as for the second part of the question, I would defer.
That's a great question. So our plan is on a weekly basis to review with our communications team all the comments that have been received. We're going to pull together a list of sort of the general topic that's been addressed and the number of people who've addressed it. We'll read that into the minutes for each subsequent commission meeting. If you'd like us to email those out to you more frequently, we can certainly do that. We can also provide sort of the raw information that the person submitted. Based on conversations with the co-chairs, we do want to make sure that folks can submit comment but not feel that their name's going to be plastered all over CTV and on the website. So it'll really be focused on the issues and not the people submitting them. To date, it's my understanding that we've received one public comment and this person submitted 3 separate emails to make sure we had all the information possible regarding his issue, and that was regarding the composition and makeup of Columbus City Council.
Any other questions on the contact the commission function? Let's take a look then at how people can sign up for Charter Review Commission emails. So while we're able to collect comments through the website, we use a separate platform for communicating with constituents. So what will happen when we click on this, we'll be taken to a page that looks a bit like this. And you see the sign up for updates or to access your subscriber preferences, please enter your contact information below. That, what the subscriber preferences refers to is if somebody is interested, they could go in and sign up for other types of content to receive. But by entering their email address here, they are only signing up for information related to the Charter Review Commission. So let's see what happens when we enter an email address. We'll enter mine and click submit. And just like that, we've got a message saying that our effort has been successful. If I were to click on that subscriber preferences, I would be taken to a list of other topics that I could subscribe to if I was interested. But we'll say that I'm not and just click close. Well, actually, before I do, any questions on the subscribing for updates page? Okay. Go ahead and close out of that. It just takes us right back to the window that we were working in. And with that, we have gone through everything that is on the website. Do we have any questions? I have a quick note then about some of the
I
communication.
think Commissioner Cabot might have.
Oh, I was just going to say, so I no longer have to carry this around anymore.
We have just some quick information about some of the communication that has gone out about the Charter Review Commission that we thought might be helpful for the commissioners. Since your meeting on April 17th, there have been a number of social media posts and email communications that have gone out to the public about your work. Beginning with the social media, we've posted 5 tweets and 5 Facebook posts since April 17th about the Charter Review Commission. And that has included the news release that was sent out summarizing the first meeting, links to the commission's website so that residents may follow your work, links to the Council's Call the Roll podcast, which is a weekly radio program that airs over the weekend on Freedom FM and is also available online. And that featured the Charter Review Commission's first meeting pretty prominently last Saturday's edition, so there was also social media posts about that. The announcement of the next meeting and a link to the page where people can sign up for email updates. So all of that has been out on social media, and that will continue, both new information and also some of the evergreen sort of things like signing up for updates and et cetera, and sharing feedback. We've sent email blasts to our entire list on April 17th with the news release summarizing this body's first meeting, and on April 23rd, a reminder email of the date that had been announced in that previous release. And also on the 23rd, we were able to send out the video that we looked at very briefly that is now available on the websites. That also had a reminder of the second meeting and a link to the adopted bylaws. Any questions on those communications? I think that would conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Adam. That's very helpful. Are we on to item number 8? We're at the tail end of our meeting.
I think you're in step.
We're on 7. Future meeting dates. Are we in agreement that we'll meet May 7th at 2 p.m.? That works for everyone?
Yes.
And we also have a meeting on
I'm sorry, the time again?
2 p.m.
2 p.m. Okay.
in this room on May 7th. And then May 22 at what time?
1 p.m.
1 p.m. on May 22. Those are our next 2 meetings.
And Co-Chair Curtin, I would note that the second meeting is a public hearing for public comment to the commission. And that meeting would be held in council chambers.
And those 2 dates work for all 5 commission members. Any dissensions? Good.
I might ask that June 26th public hearing, that will also be in council chambers?
Tentatively.
Tentatively, okay. That's it, thank you.
Okay, is there anything else under item 7 that needs discussion, Brian?
I don't believe so.
Okay, we've covered that. We're on to item 8. Staff is going to make recommendations on different categories or buckets, including recommendations on what that first category should be. The city attorney's office is going to work with council and mayor staff to compile a list of charter provisions that are believed to be obsolete, moot, or duplicative. We are going to have perhaps some recommended draft language on an automatic review mechanism, and a process by ordinance for dealing with these technical and archaic changes. Have I left anything out in terms of work product for staff?
We'll get the 200 copies, we'll get you some draft language for that as an amendment.
Draft language to eliminate the paper requirement for budget documents.
As well as to 231, which is the publishing of the annual report in book form.
Right. Any other comments or recommendations from commission members for staff work product between now and our next meeting?
Just a request, if possible, I recognize how much time goes into preparing for these meetings, but to the extent that we can have materials in advance to review, that would be very helpful.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Any other closing thoughts or comments, Co-Chair Moore?
Just want to thank the staff. for your work. It's very, very helpful and great presentation, so thank you.
Any other comments from any other commissioners? If not, I certainly would second that. The staff work has been exemplary. Thank you for easing our workload. With that, are there any objections to adjourning? We are adjourned.
Very good.